This is the Admok M400. It's a compact piston filling fountain pen which shares some design similarities with the Pelikan M400. And we'll do a direct comparison between those two models as well as a few others in just a moment. It's available in a wide variety of colors, and today I have it in a clear finish with white and silver accents. The top finial features a laser engraving and it depicts a phoenix. We then see the profile is shaped like a crown, and then the clip is stylized to look like a pelican beak. It has a nice flare up at the bottom, it's springy and very functional. The cap tapers widening down to a pretty thick cap band which reads Admok, Ingenuity, China. The cap comes off in about 3/4 of a turn to reveal a number 5 size stainless steel Schmidt made nib. I have this one in a medium, but at the time of recording this, you can also get it in a fine or a broad. And on the back, we can see the standard Schmidt black plastic feed. The grip section is fairly short. It starts with a flare up and then it has a taper to threads, which are pretty smooth to the touch. The barrel is then straight all the way back, and then we have a metal band followed by the end finial, which has a rounded off edge. If I give that end finial a twist, we'll see that it doubles as a piston knob. In the hand, the pen is well balanced, lightweight, and for me with medium-sized hands, it's a suitable length for long writing sessions. But luckily, the cap also posts deeply and securely, and it transfers the pen into basically a full-size fountain pen. With medium-sized hands, for me, the center of gravity is just about in the crook of my hand, so it's a very comfortable pen to use both posted and unposted. Also, it's important to note that the cap does post on the piston knob, so if you're not careful, you could actuate the piston rod and spew out some ink from the front of the pen. In terms of size comparisons, here's the M400, a typical Pilot G2 rollerball pen, and your standard Sharpie. Before we disassemble the Admok M400, I wanted to take a moment to compare it with a few other fountain pens. I'm going to start off with a few Pelikans. This is the M400. I have it in an older version, which is from the 90s. It features a green barrel with transparent stripes, and those stripes are now opaque if you buy a recent M400. And then I also have a Pelikan M200 here in a transparent model. We can see a lot of design similarities between these two. Overall lengths are virtually identical, and the caps are so similar that you can actually swap them between these models. I'll show you that right now with the M200. Yep, you can swap that in without any issue. There's still a decent amount of clearance to the tip of the nib. The threads are identical too. And really, the caps especially are extremely similar all the way down to that clip. Let me pull in a couple other pens. Here is a TWSBI Eco, and I have it in indigo and bronze. It's another piston filling fountain pen, but it's not as compact as the Pelikans or the Admok. However, in this transparent finish that I have for the Admok, I think that the styling is fairly similar to that TWSBI. And then I have one more piston filling fountain pen. This is the Kaweco Classic Piston Sport. It's a fairly recent model that came out on the market, but it is also a very compact piston filler, and we can see it's quite a bit shorter than either the Pelikans or the Admok. Let's take a look at these pens with their caps removed. All caps unscrew, and again, the Admok is very comparable in size to the Pelikan M400 and 200. It is just a little bit shorter because the nib is a little smaller than the Pelikans. Again, the TWSBI is significantly longer than the rest of the pens, and the Kaweco comes up as the shortest in the uncapped form. Let's take a closer look at these sections and nibs. All nibs are fully exposed and all are stainless steel with the exception of the Pelikan M400. This one has a 14 karat gold nib. In terms of the grip sections, the TWSBI has a flare up followed by a taper to threads. So do the Pelikans as well as the Admok, although I will note that the flare up on the Admok is a little bit more rounded than the Pelikans. And the Kaweco Sport has a grip section that's hourglass in shape. Let's take a look at these pens with their caps posted. All caps post securely. The TWSBI is by far the longest pen when it's posted, and the Kaweco Sport is the shortest of the bunch. In terms of how the Admok compares with the Pelikans, it does post a bit more shallowly, and it's just slightly longer in its posted form compared to the Pelikans. And that's because the knob for the piston unit is pretty flush to the pen body, and the cap actually posts onto that knob, which means if you're not careful, you could accidentally actuate that piston knob when you're rotating the cap. In contrast, the Pelikan has a slightly different design. The end finial is actually a little bit thinner than the barrel, and that means that the cap posts onto the barrel instead of the piston knob, so there's no risk of actuating the piston rod. Okay, disassembling the M400. You are going to need a wrench, and I found this TWSBI wrench fits it just about perfectly. And then you may also find grippy materials are useful to have. The cap unscrews. And if you want, you can disassemble this a little more. You can give the end finial a twist, and doing so will loosen up this ring that's on the top. And then you can pull the clip right off. Now on older Pelikan units, this finial was part of the cap liner, which you could push through the front of this cap. However, I found on modern Pelikans, that is no longer the case. It's all now one molded unit. And this Admok is designed exactly the same. So in terms of matching the Pelikan M4 design, this fits it to a T. The nib and feed are held in a nib collar. If you grab them with some grippy materials and give it a counterclockwise turn, it should unscrew from the grip section. And then if you want, you can pull them straight out of that collar. One thing to note, there is an O-ring on this nib collar, and that's the only O-ring on the entire pen, so it's a very critical item not to lose. It does keep this pen sealed. The grip section does unscrew from the barrel, and I was surprised to see that there is no O-ring between these two components. When I first got this pen, I did find a little bit of leakage between these two, and I wish that they would have included an O-ring just for extra protection. I ended up adding some silicone grease to these threads, and that has worked as a proper seal, at least in the month or so that I've owned this pen. If you want to remove the piston unit, we're going to unscrew the piston knob. Doing so reveals two flats, which we can grab a hold of with our wrench. And I'm going to give it a counterclockwise turn. I like to unscrew using the barrel instead of the wrench in order to avoid cracking the acrylic. Pretty soon, the barrel can be pulled out, and then we're left with the piston unit. Now, I don't really recommend disassembling this any further. For regular maintenance, I add some silicone grease to this head to ensure good sealing against the walls on the barrel, and then also some silicone grease on these threads to ensure good, smooth operation with this rod going in and out of the connector. But I will show you that you can remove it. If you continue unscrewing that piston knob, the rod will come out. And then if I further unscrew it, the knob will come out of this connector piece, and we also have a key. At this point, the pen is fully disassembled. In order to reassemble, I'm going to start with the piston unit. We'll put the key into the knob and then grab our connector piece and screw that down. I'm going to screw down until just behind these flats. And then I'm going to add our rod into the front. And what we're looking for as I screw down this rod is for the rod to be as retracted as far back as we can when this knob butts up against the flange. And that feels pretty snug there. So I'm gonna actually stop. If you do find that you have a bit of play, I would remove the rod, unscrew the piston unit a little bit further back, put the rod back in, and then screw the whole thing down. But I got lucky with getting this right the first time. Let's go ahead and put this back into our barrel. As I get to the bottom, it will cause the rod to extend, and then we can tighten it further with those flats. I'll grab my wrench and just give it a little bit more torque. And just like that, we have a fully functional piston. Next, I'm going to grab our nib collar and our feed. The nib collar is keyed, so in one orientation, the feed goes a little bit deeper. And then we'll grab our nib, line it up to the feed, and push it in. What we're looking for is the shoulders of the feed to line up with the shoulders of the nib. I'm gonna then put this into the front of the grip section and screw that whole thing onto the pen. They are two separate groups of threads, so it's important to note that you may need to add some extra torque to each component separately, but that looks great. And then in terms of the cap, I'm going to put the clip over the top finial and then grab our ring. The ring is tapered. You want the smaller diameter to be facing the cap. And we'll try and screw this down. Great. There is no notch on the cap to hold the clip in place, so I like to try and position it. And personally, I like lining it up with Admok, which is located right there. And then we'll just tighten this down. And if you want, you can use some grippy materials to get a nice secure grip on that clip. Great. We'll put the cap back on, and at this point, we're ready to ink up. Okay, inking up the M400. Today I selected an ink by Iroshizuku. This is called Shinkai. It's a pretty deep blue ink with interesting properties on the page, and we'll take a closer look at that during the writing sample. I'll go ahead and take the cap off the bottle and the pen. Extend the piston all the way down. Put the nib into the ink and screw up the piston. In order to get a full fill, I'm going to expel the ink and then draw it up one more time. That helps remove any air that was in the feed during the initial draw. And that looks like a really full fill. I'm going to go ahead and wipe off our grip section as well as our nib. We'll cap up our pen and our ink. And at this point, we're ready to write. Okay, writing with the Admok M400. Cap unscrews, and I am going to post it. And today we're writing with a medium stainless steel nib made by Schmidt. And it's a very well-tuned nib. It's smooth and wet with just a hint of feedback so you can tell what kind of paper you're using. It's extremely reliable, and if I have anything negative to say about this nib, it's that it is a fairly stiff steel nib, which is fine. That's actually a preferred feature that I like in my note-taking fountain pens. And of the three major nib manufacturers, those being Jowo, Bock, and Schmidt, I do tend to prefer Schmidt nibs above the rest. In terms of ink, today we have one from Iroshizuku. And it's called Shinkai. And it's a pretty unique ink. If you look closely, you can see it slightly change shade as it dries on the page. And that's a unique characteristic that I don't see on many other inks. In terms of flex, if you go slow, you can push out a little bit of line variation, but there's not very much. It is, again, a fairly stiff steel nib. And for reverse writing, a lot more feedback than the front ways up. I wouldn't quite call it scratchy, though. But the feed did have a little bit of trouble keeping up on the second word, so for me personally, I don't think it's a very reliable reverse writer. So what do I think? of the Admok M400. I'm a big fan of this pen. I love its compact size, and yet the fact that it's a piston filler and it has a really big ink capacity. Those two features are something that you don't often see on pens this size, and this has just added to that short list. Also, I love how easy it is to disassemble. Even though it's stylized to look a lot like the Pelikan M400, that pen you can only remove the nib unit, and that's about it. But this pen you can remove the nib, the feed, the grip section, the nib collar, as well as the entire piston unit. And to me, that's an upgrade over the Pelikan M400 and 200 series, and that makes this pen a much better pen for long-term durability and maintenance. I also love how many different options this pen is available in. It has a huge variety of different types of acrylics, as well as different nib sizes. Plus, because it is a Schmidt No. 5 nib, you can easily swap this nib out for a wide variety of other nibs as well. And even though it's a compact pen in the hand, I am okay using it for short notes, and for longer writing sessions, it's a great poster. So it should be very comfortable for people who have large hands to use as well. But I do see areas for improvement with this pen, and the fact that the cap posts onto the piston knob is one of them. If you aren't careful, you could accidentally leak out some ink if you start unscrewing the cap instead of pulling it straight off. And then another issue that I had with this pen early on is I did find that the ink would tend to leak out of this grip section, and I think it's because there is no O-ring that is sealing off the grip from the rest of the pen body. So I think that's an area where it would be great for Admok to maybe take a little bit of a closer look at this design. And lastly, I am a little bit disappointed by how closely this cap resembles the Pelikan M400. If you take this cap out of the equation, this pen is actually quite unique. It disassembles far more than the Pelikan, and it has a great Schmidt nib and a large ink capacity. In fact, I would say this actually has more in common with the TWSBI Mini than the Pelikan M400. But when you then take into account the cap itself, it is a blatant copy. Not only are all the design features very similar, but you can actually swap this into a Pelikan M400 with no issues. So I wish maybe Admok would take a closer look at the engraving they put on this pen and use that as inspiration to develop a more unique cap. But overall, I am a big fan of this pen. I love its compact nature. It's comfortable in the hand with a great posting experience. It has a huge ink supply, and it uses one of my favorite standard nibs. And that just leaves me to say, thank you for watching.